Hello, everyone. Just get started as people start trickling in. I'd like to welcome everyone on behalf of the Watershed Security Fund, a partnership between the First Nations Water Caucus, the First Nations Fisheries Council as Secretariat to the Water Caucus, and the Real Estate Foundation of BC. Thank you all for joining us this afternoon. So great to have you here and to see you. My name is Jenna Duncan. I'm a senior manager with the First Nations Fisheries Council. I'm also a citizen of the Tahltan Council First Nation, located in the Yukon. Today we have a few other panelists joining us who have the videos on. So we have Madison Ratai from the Fisheries Council as well, and from the Real Estate Foundation of BC, we have Leanne, Adarshana, Natalie, and Cheyenne. Madison and Adarshana and Cheyenne will be doing a lot of the kind of background work in just making sure that everything runs smoothly this afternoon for us. And yeah, I would love for everyone who's joined us as participants. You won't be able to see your videos pop up as we've got the Zoom set in webinar format, but would love for you to introduce yourself in the chat box, your name, your community or organization, and your location, just so we can see who's all joining us and for others to see as well. So through this webinar, we're hoping to share some information about the Watershed Security Fund and its newly developed grants program, provide helpful information about the intake and grant application process, and hear and respond to your questions and gain any insights from your comments on where to further clarify or consider for future intakes. And in the weeks ahead, we'll be updating our frequently asked questions based on the questions raised today, as well as supporting any application inquiries that come through, and sharing any feedback from the webinar with our grants working group. And this initiative is kind of new and innovative, supporting kind of new ways of looking at things as well as building on some past work. So we very much appreciate hearing your questions and comments and learning from you and finding out ways where we can make improvements along the way. So we've got up on this slide a bit of an agenda for today. So we'll be moving through an overview, some different presentation slides, an overview of the Watershed Security Fund, a grants program overview, a grants application assessment criteria and budget form, and then we'll have opportunity for questions and discussions at the end. This will be the live questions and discussion with a couple panelists. We do have the Q&A box, so please feel free to enter any questions in there. Feel free to enter those throughout the presentations as we go along. We will be going through all three of the presentations and then opening for live questions, but we will have staff in the background answering some of the questions in that Q&A box during the presentations. And for any questions that we're not able to get to, or answer, either typed in the Q&A box or via the panelists, please feel free to contact us at the grants@watershedSecurityFund.ca email, and we'll be happy to get back to you by email or arrange a time to connect. Or if a question comes up after the fact, we really encourage you to feel free to reach out to us anytime, and we're here to support any questions or the applications as they get started. So I will move us along fairly quickly here, and I will pass it to Madison, who will be walking us through the Watershed Security Fund overview presentation.
Thanks, Jenna. So getting right into it, at the Watershed Security Fund, we are dedicated to safeguarding the health of British Columbia's watershed for future generations. By investing in projects that prioritize reconciliation, ecosystem health, climate resilience, and sustainable economies, we can help our watersheds remain healthy and vibrant for generations to come. On March 6th in 2023, the province of BC announced an initial $100 million investment to kickstart the creation of the fund, which is to be co-developed and co-governed with First Nations. That contribution is currently generating $3 to $5 million annually to fund watershed work. With this initial contribution, the goal is to grow and establish the permanent funding stream and co-government entity to support resilient, healthy watersheds across the province. In the interim, we are delivering the grant funding to communities and supporting the co-development process and efforts to grow the fund. The First Nations Water Caucus with the First Nations Fisheries Council and the Real Estate Foundation of BC are collaborating as partners in this impactful work. And together we are providing the interim stewardship for the fund and supporting 8 key areas of work that will provide a foundation for the fund as we work to co-develop a permanent entity for the long term. These are the 8 key areas of work identified as priorities by the Joint Executive. As you can imagine, it's been quite a lot of work to get all these areas of work kind of going, and then we are adapting as we go. Our initial focus has been on establishing the joint operations and governance, investment planning, financial management, grants program, and our communications. In the coming year, we'll be focusing on the other areas of work, which include fund growth, co-development of the permanent entity, and evaluation and learning. To govern our interim work, we have a commitment to action, which is a relationship agreement that provides the framework for the Water Caucus, FNFC, and REFBC to work together on the co-development and implementation of the fund. It describes the principles, oversight, and decision-making structures that support our work and is aligned with the grant agreement from the province. The diagram on the right provides an illustration of our governance structure, which includes our joint executive, which acts like a board, with members from each of the partners and support from the province in an advisory role. Along with this, we have a number of working groups that include a mix of internal and external members, and has been a really interesting journey as we continue to work and build on all these pieces. If you want to read more about our kind of interim governance structure, feel free to visit our website and you can read our annual report there. We're very grateful to have the following members on our joint executive, which includes Lydia Huitzum, Hugh Breaker, Mavis Underwood, Leslie Dickey, Mark Gifford, and Stu Barnes. As I mentioned, one of the areas of work is communications, especially around sharing our story of the work in an accessible, transparent, and inspiring way. And this is reflected in our communications goal. Ideally, we want to work in partnership to strengthen a shared understanding of the importance of watersheds, tell the work of the story, particularly as we hope to work with project teams and communities to bring their visibility to their work and tell their story. We also want to grow the fund, which communications will be a key tool in growing the fund. And lastly, provide transparency and openness in our communications as we continue this journey in co-developing the fund. We encourage you, if you haven't already, to sign up for a newsletter on our website. This will be one of the main tools to communicate updates on the grants program and developments on the fund. We've also just completed our brand and logo, and in October, we're excited to launch the official website. With the first round of fund grants approved this past September, we now have a funded projects page, which highlights the 26 projects that received grants in our first intake. As we announce future projects, we'll continue to add these projects to this page and to the map over time so people can see the importance of this work in years to come. In the coming months, we'll be conducting a review of the website to ensure information is clear and consistent with our other messaging and ensure audiences find it user-friendly and that the information is being well received clearly. And we welcome any feedback from all of you on this call as well. Lastly, with a lot of good work underway and many more projects seeking funding, growing the fund is top of mind for us. As I mentioned at the beginning, with this initial $100 million investment from the province, an permanent endowment for the fund was seeded. We have value-aligned investment strategy, and funds are being invested in a diversified asset mix, which will protect the fund and generate solid returns. But as we grow this fund significantly, we need to grow this fund significantly to prove the dependable flow of annual funding at a scale that can meet our needs. For now, the initial contribution is generating an annual baseline budget for grants and programs to 3 to 5 million per year. But there is a huge gap between the 34 million in ask for 131 projects that we received in our first grants intake in June and the amount that we could actually fund this year. RFC is generously contributing additional dollars in these first 2 years to increase the available funds for this work, but the fund needs further support. We can't do this alone and encourage whoever is involved in this work to share your stories and experiences wherever possible. Our goal is to eventually create a larger endowment of $1 billion that can generate 75 million annually to support critical watershed work in our province. So that's kind of wraps up our high level overview. I'm going to pass it to Leanne and Natalie to talk more about the grants program specifically. And just a reminder to ask any questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to them as the presentations go on.
Madison, and hello everyone. It's really great to be here with you today. There's many folks on the call I know, and we really appreciate you spending this time with us to learn about the program. I'm going to share another slide deck with you, and I'll start, and then Natalie will take over partway through. Okay, and just so folks know, the slide deck that Madison just shared and this slide deck that Natalie and I will run through will also be available on the website. It basically forms our grants program guide. There's quite a few details on the slides so that it is handy in that PDF format. Yeah, it'll just be there for your future reference. So these are some key elements of our program that I'll run through, and then Natalie is going to walk us through the application form itself and the budget form. So our grants program is guided by a vision for a future where flourishing watersheds are of the utmost importance, and water is highly valued as the sacred source of life. Our grants program supports work that nourishes our waterways, upholds the strength of First Nations voices and ways of being in relation to the land and water, and weaves together enduring relationships between First Nations and non-First Nations. Funding will meet water stewards and water champions where they are at, building partnerships and collaboration among diverse groups. Like the natural ebb and flow of our waterways, we will grow and evolve through this work, with water remaining the most important environmental, cultural, economic, and spiritual wellspring we share. That vision and other key aspects of our grants program were developed in partnership with the Watershed Security Fund Grants Working Group. They were convened last April to support and provide direction on the grants program, and we're incredibly grateful for their leadership and wisdom. They are a diverse group of people with deep experience and connection to watershed needs and communities across BC, and they are generously providing their learning and insights to support this work. This slide here shows our journey over the past year to launch the grants program. As Madison talked about, there was quite a few foundational pieces of our fund to get in place and of our partnership. And once those were established, a key priority for the Joint Executive and the First Nations Water Caucus was for us to get dollars out to community. So we designed the program with the Grants Working Group and held our first application intake last spring, with 26 projects approved for funding this fall, and now our second intake this November with grants to be approved in April. Looking ahead, we could anticipate regular intakes each fall with dollars flowing each spring, though it's still early days and we're learning and working out details with direction from the Water Caucus, Joint Executive, and the Working Group. With the short timeline to design and launch the program, we've been doing our best and we'll continue to learn and adapt as we go. We do want to listen and respond to community and project teams so we can evolve the program in relevant, responsive ways, and we really do welcome your feedback. Key program outcomes, goals, and objectives are shown on this slide. And to keep us moving along, I'm not going to go through each of them, but they're in the PDF of this presentation for your reference, if you like. Core principles and values that underpin our program are shown here. We recognize there is a shared reliance and need to work together to care for the natural world and for water. We see the importance of taking a holistic, whole of watershed approach. We recognize that First Nations title, rights, and sovereignty are crucial to the health and sustainability of lands and waters. We recognize the strength of First Nations voices and ways of being in relation to a whole of watershed approach. We want to show up in this work in a spirit of reciprocity, relationship, and meaningful partnership. We want to honor and respect a diversity of perspectives and move towards new forms of shared decision-making and ways of addressing power imbalances and equity. And we want to take an intergenerational long-term focus. So with that in mind, our grant funding is available to support projects and initiatives that achieve actionable progress on ecosystems health and which prioritize reconciliation, healthy communities, climate resilience, and sustainable economies in any of these areas of watershed-based work shown within the circle here. We have these high-level descriptions to provide a bit more guidance, and we may continue to adapt these a little bit as we see where the work lands, but this is what we're working with for now in terms of 6 areas of work that we are funding. In these early years, we know some types of work may be limited by our relatively small grants budget. So for example, some larger nature-based infrastructure or restoration projects often require millions of dollars in funding. And this might mean we can only fund a portion of that kind of work, such as planning and design aspects, rather than a full-scale project. But we do hope that as the fund grows, more dollars will be available. Advancing UNDRIP is an overarching priority for the fund, and there are a number of ways we'll look to support that. Using a framework developed by Tara Marsden, we ask questions on the grant application that help us understand how UNDRIP is being advanced through projects led by First Nations and non-First Nations. You can see some of those questions here. As part of this work, it's also important for us to understand applicants' organizational relationship to First Nations, and we are using a matrix called the I4DM that was developed by the Circle on Philanthropy to help do that. You'll see it referenced in the application form, along with some guidance on how to use the matrix to help you self-identify your organization. The review and decision-making process for grant applications considers many dimensions of a project proposal. In addition to UNDRIP, we look at 5 other assessment criteria grounded in prior learnings and principles and values that underpin the grants program and the fund. So where applicable, we look at free prior informed consent, regional equity considerations, community connection, economic resiliency, jobs, training, and mentorship, and the diversity of interests and collaboration involved in the work. We've got some questions that help share some of the aspects that we're interested in each of those areas. And then we also have a little bit more information and background on why we see these as important to the grants program. Our grants budget in this first year has come from a combination of interest earned on the fund and some additional contributions from REFBC to help get some dollars out quickly. In our first intake, we were able to grant out about 5 million. And in our second intake, based on current information we have, we're looking at about 6.5 million available for that right now. Funded projects do not need to spend their grant funding within a specific fiscal year. And the applications can be made for short-term or multi-year projects of up to 3 years. And you do have the option to extend your timeline if you need. Funded work can start anytime after grants are approved. So given our small initial grants budget, we are taking a scaled developmental approach with 3 funding streams that support a range of project sizes at different stages. We hope this can enable some funding for organizations and projects well on their way with a foundation of prior work, and also offer resources to others at earlier stages of project conception, design, research, or relationship building. Decisions on how many projects will be funded in each of the streams are not predetermined. It will depend on the mix of applications received, but we expect a balance across all 3 streams. And for our first intake with that funding of about 5 million, we were able to support 26 projects with 9 in stream 1, 9 in stream 2, and 8 in stream 3. And there's more information on our website about all of those projects. Across the 3 funding streams, at higher levels of funding, there will be some prioritization of projects led by organizations who are generally further along the continuum towards First Nations-led, partnered, or informed work. Right now, we have these general guidelines rather than specific funding targets and percentages. Our overall goal is to center First Nations voices, experiences, approaches, and leadership, while also making space for resourcing the important work of non-First Nations-led initiatives that contribute to holistic, collaborative, shared ways forward for addressing watershed needs. For those of you that might have seen our first intake, originally Stream 3 had a maximum grant size of 500,000. We did end up shifting that down to 400,000. And even in Stream 1, there were no grants approved above 400,000. And we had to make that decision just in order to fund a few more projects. There's so much good work out there, and we know the dollars are needed, but it just helps us manage and get a few more groups funded in these early days by lowering that amount just slightly. Eligible organizations for Watershed Security Fund grant funding include registered nonprofits, educational institutions, social enterprises, First Nations, and local regional governments. Eligibility is not restricted to CRA registered charities or qualified donees. And in addition to those listed here, there are some other types of organizations that may be eligible, but you should check with program staff if you don't fit into one of the categories above, because primarily we'll be funding the types of organizations that you see on this slide. In alignment with our principles, we do want our grants program to be approachable, accessible, adaptable, and supportive, and grounded in good relationships, trust, and partnership. As part of this, we are offering several ways that applicants can get support and guidance through our website, our application guide, and grants program FAQs, and those will be updated after this website. We're offering these webinars, which are being recorded and will also be available. And you can feel free to reach out to Darshana, Natalie, or other program staff from FNFC through email, phone calls, and connections. And we're also offering 3 ways to apply. You can do it through our online portal, a Word document, or through an interactive conversation with our staff. Looking ahead, once we're further along in developing the grants program and fund, we can explore other opportunities, such as connecting applicants to other sources of funding, peer learning and supports for applicants and grantees, and learning from our first intakes and weaving those into future cycles and intakes. Yeah, so that wraps up our overview of the grants program, and I'm going to turn it over to Natalie to run through the application, but also just want to mention and emphasize that in these early days, we are just interim stewards of the fund and the grants program, and the eventual goal is to create a permanent co-governed entity to carry the fund and the grants program in the long term. And yeah, but it's a real honor and privileged to be able to do this work in partnership with the First Nations Water Caucus and the First Nations Fisheries Council. And enormous thanks to all of you who are doing this important work in community. Okay, so over to you, Natalie.
Hey, thanks, Leanne. Hello, everyone. For the next little bit, I'm going to run through the application and budget form in more detail. And like Leanne said, if there's any questions that you have that we aren't able to get to today, or if you want to talk a bit more about your project or need some more support with your application, just feel free to reach out to us. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Pardon me. So a Word version of this application form, as well as some initial instructional text, is available on the website. So whichever way you choose to submit your application, we recommend that you download the Word version from the grants page on the website, as there is good guidance in that form, and also in the budget form, which you can also get from the website. And there we go. So the application starts off, like many applications do, asking for basic information about your organization as well as contact information. In addition, as part of our commitment to UNDRIP, we are asking applicants to identify their organizational relationship to First Nations in BC using the I4DM matrix that Leanne shared earlier. On the application form, we provide a link to information on the matrix and ask project teams to familiarize yourselves with it, so you can self-identify your relationship to First Nations, or let us know if you currently don't have a relationship. Cheyenne had put some good information in the chat when Leanne was talking about this, and those links are also available on our website through the application guide when you get to this section. And next, after the organizational information, section 2 of the application gives an opportunity to describe your project or initiative and how it addresses watershed health and security, including relevant prior or future work. So relevant prior work could include, for example, if you'd received funding through HWI or IWI on your project previously. We also ask applicants to identify up to 2 funding themes or areas of work that are most relevant to your project. So those are the funding themes that Leanne mentioned earlier. And, we know that many of these projects touch on a lot of the funding themes, but if you can just pick the 2 that are most relevant to your project, that would be helpful. We also ask people to indicate which water basin and territories their project activities will take place in, so we can understand and document geographic distribution of funds and project work. There is a project map on our website that shows the geographic distribution of the project approved in intake 1, and we will continue to add to that map through subsequent intakes. With similar data available for IWI and HWI projects that you can see on the slide, we can start to see the evolving picture of funded watershed work by watershed basins, but it is not a complete picture, and we do hope to have to do more to better understand the complex funding landscape in BC to help identify needs, gaps, and potential opportunities to dovetail with complementary funding programs in the future. For this year, we're going to do our best to consider regional equity and funding decisions, including listening to applicants' experience and understanding of community impacts and needs. More thorough research and gap analysis could be planned and resourced in future years for the purpose of potentially prioritizing certain regions or basins, or another idea is to offer some facilitated support to applicants and funded organizations regarding other available funding sources, but that is something that will take a bit more time to resource. And next, for project information, we also ask applicants to indicate which funding stream they're applying within based on the amount requested in their application, and tell us the project duration for which funding is requested and the project start date or anticipated start date. As mentioned earlier, projects can be short-term or multi-year, up to 3 years, and funding is not tied to a particular fiscal year. So the grant year that we're funding is based on your start date, not on your fiscal year. Section 3 of the application is an opportunity for organizations to describe their approach to advancing UNDRIP. So using a framework developed by Tara Marsden, the application form gives First Nations the option of providing their distinct perspective on UNDRIP in relation to their project. Non-First Nations-led organizations are asked to describe how they are planning to action UNDRIP in 5 or 6 key ways. In addition to helping us understand and assess projects for funding, successful applicants can report on these commitments once underway or completed through interim or final reports, and we can better understand and share collective progress over time. Section 4 touches on the additional assessment criteria or lenses that we discussed earlier that Leanne talked about. Please do fill this section out. Responses to these questions, even if brief, provide valuable insight into your project, and we encourage you to add comments to all of the questions that apply. There's also a box you can check if a question is not applicable to your project. And again, there's these additional background on these assessment lenses, and we encourage you to reference this part of the guide as you're filling out these questions in the application. Partnerships can be an indicator of collaboration and community connection or an organization's relationship to First Nations. We will not be evaluating proposals based on the number of partners. We're more interested in the quality of partnerships. So there are some questions on the application form about that. For letters of support, I know there's already a question about in the Q&A. We understand that there are challenges in getting letters of support from busy partners. But if you've indicated that you are working in partnership with a First Nation, we will be looking for meaningful evidence of that. So aside from letters of support, that evidence can look like an MOU or emails or evidence of shared involvement in events or other related projects. Things that don't burden nations who are often fielding many such requests. So letters of support are encouraged, but if you are not able to provide them, there are other ways of providing evidence of those partnerships. And then section 6 of the application is related to the budget. So ask for the amount of funding being requested and related budget information, and includes a list of eligible expenses. So there's the range of them listed there. That can be staffing and labor, program and project planning, design, delivery, coordination, communication, convening, relationship building, ceremony and cultural protocols, honoraria, etc. We encourage proposal budgets that support elders, youth, and ceremony and sharing the story of project work. Site costs and project-related capital expenses are eligible with some limitations that are explained on the budget form. For projects in Stream 1, so those are the ones up to 50,000, we only ask for a summary description of how Watershed Security Funds will be used for project expenses, so you don't have to fill out a budget form for those. We do, however, ask that you try to give some detail in your description of your budget and break it down a little bit for us so we can have that information to review your application. And for projects in Stream 2 and 3, there is the budget form on our website that we are asking you to download and complete, pardon me, as part of your application. If you reach out to us in advance, we can help with other options, such as submitting a budget form you previously prepared for another funding program in lieu of our budget template. We just ask that you give us plenty of time so we can jointly ensure that it provides the information we need to receive and review your budget information. Requirements for matching funding have been identified as barriers for many organizations doing watershed work. So we do not require a matching funding here. It is always good to see if you have it, particularly in projects in Stream 3, those larger projects. If you have other sources of funding, that is helpful for us to know, but not a requirement. And as part of project reporting, we will be interested in knowing about other sources of funding that were leveraged from this funding across all of the streams. So for us to better learn how our funding is leveraged and to understand and share other sources of funding for this type of work. So here's the budget form, which is available to download from the grants page on the website. It includes several categories of expenses which might be relevant to your project and their explanatory notes right on the form to provide guidance. I'm not going to go over this in great detail. If you do have questions about the budget, please do reach out to us. The one thing I'll say is also on the budget form, we are asking for the numbers or an estimate of the numbers of staff that will be funded through this project. And so that's another important piece on the budget form to fill out. And then in the final section of the application, there's an option of providing additional information such as videos or website links, and give some guidance on how to submit that supplementary information or documents. So again, this could include things like letters of support or like we said, emails or other sources of evidence that can show the depth of partnership with First Nations in particular in those supplementary documents. Here, we also give you the opportunity to let us know if you would be interested in added to lists to be notified of future potential learning opportunities related to UNDRIP or watershed engagement and learning events and funding supports. So we are still in the early stages of developing this program, but hope to be able to offer more resources and engagement opportunities for applicants, grantees, and people working in the watershed sector. We know that these applications are a lot of work, and it can be challenging and frustrating with all the different formats and timelines. And we hope we can be as clear and transparent as possible on what we're looking for and expecting in the application. And we welcome feedback as people learn about the program and go through the application process. And we really appreciate you taking the time to be here today to learn about the program. I want to thank you for the work you're doing and the shared commitment to this inspiring, impactful, and healing work. So that ends the presentation portion of the webinar. There's time now for questions. You can see quite a few coming in through the question and answers already. And welcome Madison back to let us know which ones we should be addressing out loud.
Sure, maybe we can start with if our project wasn't previously funded through IWI or HWI, is there priority given to those projects previously funded?
Sorry, we're both unmuted. I can start. You can add if you want, Natalie or Leanne. But no, there's no prioritization given for HWI and IWI. We'll be using kind of the different metrics that Leanne and Natalie went through in the application, and some of those considerations on kind of seeing what like geographic considerations and things like that. So no specific funding is necessarily is being prioritized for past work. I don't know, Natalie, if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add is the Grants Working Group recognizes that there's a balance between wanting to continue supporting good work that's necessary, that's already been happening, as well as making space to fund projects and work that hasn't had the chance of being funded previously. So like Jenna said, there isn't a priority, but we're considering everything in the application as those decisions are being made.
Awesome, thanks. The next question is it possible to have more than one project, say a smaller and a mid-sized project, funded at the same time?
No, short answer. Because of limited funding for this round, and just so you know, for the first intake, I think we might have said this already, but we've received 131 applications and we had the funding for 26. So in these early stages of the fund, we are only going to be looking at one application per organization. And if you submit more than one, we'll be getting back in touch with you and just asking you to pick which one is your priority for us to be reviewing and assessing at this time.
Thanks, Natalie. The next question, someone made a statement around grants kind of coming only to the Fraser watershed. Wondering if any of you could speak to how geographic distribution is taken into consideration for our grants program.
Yeah, thanks, Madison, and definitely great point made there. As Leanne and Natalie mentioned, geographic distribution is a key thought and consideration when reviewing applications. So looking at the current funding landscape, as well as hearing any challenges in different areas for accessing funding or community challenges as well. So we're definitely wanting to take all of those different considerations into account as we look through different applications and trying as best as we can to have a bit of geographic distribution and representation.
Thanks, Jenna. There's one question around if board or council resolutions are required to apply to our grants program.
I can answer this. Feel free, Natalie, if you want to answer your question. No, I don't think a band council resolution is necessarily required. We do look for if there's any other information to show that the application is being supported by the band or the nation, and any other kind of pieces that you have. If you have a band council resolution that's in process that won't be available by the end of our application's date, you can feel free to note that in the application. We realize that that can take a while and depend on when council and might be meeting. So want to recognize that as well, and the timing limitations that we have with this intake. So if there is something that you would like that will be coming and you let us know that it might come a little bit after closing, that's definitely something we can consider. But just looking for any kind of support or pieces that you might want to include to show that.
Thanks, Jenna. The next question is asking, would there be any conflict in applying for the Watershed Security Fund grant if funding has already been received from REFBC for a different but related project?
Great question. No, that wouldn't be a conflict. They are separate programs. It's always helpful if it's a related project or the same project, it's always helpful for us to know. And there is the question in the application about, prior work. But if it's a separate project, we will know, but it's not considered a conflict.
Thanks, Natalie. Next question kind of speaks to how decisions are made for which projects get funded. If maybe you can speak to that process a little bit.
Sure, I can speak to that. And Jenna and Leanne, please feel free to hop in if I'm missing anything. So staff review all of the applications to just assess, making sure that they are a fit for the funding program. But recommendations are made by the grants working group, and Leanne shared that information earlier in the slides. The process that the grants working group took in this first intake was to try to fund a similar number of projects per stream. Those obviously represent different dollar amounts given the size of the grants. And so with this first intake, it was about, I think, 7 to 10 projects were funded per stream. And they worked to try to make those funding decisions by consensus. So they came to the review meeting, having reviewed the applications and picking, I believe it was their top 5 that they felt were priorities for funding. And where there was consensus, those ones were being recommended for funding, and where there wasn't consensus, they then had conversations to kind of talk about why they felt certain projects were really important for funding. And then, like we've talked about a bit earlier as well, looking at kind of the overall package of funding and making sure that we weren't funding, all of the projects were in one geographic area, making sure there's kind of a range of geographic areas being represented there, making sure that there was a range of project types represented there as well. Leanne and Jenna, is there anything else you'd like to add to the to that process?
I could add a couple of things. Just want to also mention that the recommendations made by the grants working group do go to the joint executive, and the joint executive is the body that has the ultimate approval and decision making in terms of their government role. And yeah, staff did do quite a bit of work to help provide information to the grants working group on the projects, and using the assessment criteria that we talked about earlier, and looking at the commitments to UNDRIP that we're centering, and other dimensions of the program goals and objectives. And, you know, with this first intake, I guess just want to emphasize there was so many strong projects. I mean, if we'd had more funding, we could have funded, like there was so many that could have been funded. So the decisions are really tough. And as Natalie said, you know, it was really an effort to fund a mix of projects in different regions of the province. And yeah, just doing our best to continue to do that and hopefully grow the fund. Jenna, do you have anything else to add in terms of the review and decision-making process?
No, I don't think so. Just, yeah, we've got a wide range of people with different backgrounds on staff and on the working group who are able to bring that past experience into reviewing the applications. So really appreciative of those different working backgrounds, whether they be in a more technical capacity or with funding previously, and bringing all of that information so that we're able to between staff doing a first review and the working group putting together recommendations, able to take a holistic look at the applications that come in, and it's a process that we'll continue to refine and see if there's any tools that can support it in the future.
Thanks for that. Next question is around expenses. Can expenses be spent before the project is accepted to be funded? Example, some time-sensitive watershed work that needs to be completed before the spring. Can those expenses that are needed for that be applied before the project is accepted?
Do you want me to take this one? Okay. Madison, feel free to identify one of us to answer a question. You can just use your discretion. Really, funding can start as soon as that approval happens. So for example, in our first intake, the joint executive approved the projects in September. So any work that happened after September could be funded. And likewise, for this intake, any work, grants are to be approved in April by the joint executive. So any work that happens from April onwards could be funded through our dollars. And yeah, we do understand it's really hard to bridge different pots of funding. You know, so if you need to front load costs a little bit, or, you know, that's probably okay, but generally the work should be happening and expenses covered after the approvals of your grant happens.
Thanks, Anne. Next question is around also around the funding amounts. Do we provide partial funding on proposal, or do we simply fund 100% of the funding, or not at all?
Natalie, you can answer this question.
Sure. I think, and or maybe somebody else step in if you feel like I'm not answering this question. I think what this is asking is if you submit a grant for a certain amount, if we would fund it at a lesser amount. Is that okay? Great. So that did happen in the first intake, which is, as Leanne explained, we in the first intake, for stream 3 projects, the ones that were up to 500,000, the grants working group made a decision to fund up to a maximum of 400,000 in order to be able to fund more projects. So those applications that came in at above 400,000, we had a conversation with them saying that we wanted to approve the project, but at a lower amount, and checked in if that would be okay with them. For the second intake, we've then changed that amount to 400,000 to match what the maximum approved in stream 1 was, and the grants working group is committing to not be changing budgets again. So for this intake, we will be approving the amount that is being requested for. So if it is a requested amount for 400,000, that would be the amount approved. And similar with stream 1 and 2, we're not touching the budgets there. Unless, I mean, an exception to that would be if a project proposal came in with something in it that we were not able to fund, then it might be a conversation of, you know, we can't fund this aspect of it, but we can fund this. But otherwise we're planning on approving the requested amount. Yeah.
Thanks, Natalie. For this next question, maybe Jenna or Natalie, if you want to answer, wondering if you could just clarify whether the emphasis is on water, aquatic habitats, or watersheds, including terrestrial habitats, and just wondering if a project on terrestrial wildlife would be eligible.
Sure, I can start it off and then open it to Natalie and Leanne if there's anything that you want to add. But we are focusing on watersheds, taking a whole of watershed approach to this work. So recognizing that that work and things that happen on the land or with wildlife in turn will affect water and watersheds and the interconnectedness of all of the parts. So not wanting to kind of separate those out. However, we would be looking for that connection piece to kind of be addressed within a project application. So an explanation of why that might be something that is needed to support the watersheds in your area or in your community. The more information that can connect that to us, if applicable, would be helpful. But we are really trying to look at that whole of watershed approach and how everything is connected. So that would likely be something that we would be able to fund. And if there is any other specific questions about a specific project and if that might be eligible, then very much welcome you to send us an email and we can chat about it further and chat about the specific application and project a little bit more. But no, Natalie or Leanne, if you have anything else.
Awesome. Okay. Noting the time, maybe one more question, and then I think we have to wrap things up, unfortunately. Just wondering if, in terms of the funding themes, if there's a certain amount of the funding that is allocated to each theme, and will a project be more or less likely to receive funding for certain types of work?
No. So no, we haven't, with the funding themes, we have not split the fund into an amount per theme. The themes are helpful for us to see what's coming in and get a sense of the work that is happening and that is needing to happen in the province. And we do, want to make sure that we're not only funding in one theme, but we haven't portioned out the funding in that way. And the second question is whether it would be more likely to get funding if it was a certain theme. Was that it? Yeah. No, again, there's not a hierarchy of the different themes. It's been, we're seeing quite a few applications come in under like the collaborative governance side of things, because that's a tough piece to get funded through other sources of funding. But it's certainly not there isn't a weight on the different themes, and we haven't split up funding by theme. Sorry if that was a bit of an awkward answer. Leanne and Jenna, do you have anything to add to that, please?
No, I think you did a great job. Thanks, Natalie.
Well, thanks everyone for your questions. Really appreciate them. And if there was a question that you had that wasn't answered, and or you want to just discuss it more, again, really encourage you to reach out to us at our email. And we'll be working to update our online frequently asked questions to address some of the questions that were raised today. And if there's a popular question that we weren't able to get to live, then we can populate that as well. And we'll be sharing some of the questions and feedback from this webinar with our grants working group. And a reminder that today's slides, as well as a recording of this webinar, will be available on our website to support the application process. And I'll just repeat it again. If you have any questions or just if you want to connect, please feel free to reach out to us at the grants at Watershed Security Fund email, and we're very happy to connect with you and answer any questions or just have a conversation about a project that you are interested in applying for. So thank you so much. I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day and week and a wonderful weekend.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.